And we are now in Belgium, where we're speaking to our good friend Bart. Bart, it's great to have you back on the show. As always, whenever we have you on the show, it's usually because there's some interesting young player making waves in the Jupiler Pro League, and almost certainly destined for one of Europe's top leagues. And I think this conversation is absolutely no exception. We're, of course, talking about Christos Tzolis, the Greek winger, who was the star of the most recent Belgian market value update. We saw his market value rise by 10 million euros to 40 million euros, which meant he now became not only the most valuable player in the Belgian top flight, but the most valuable player ever to play in the Belgian top flight. And we were just discussing a moment ago there that there's this kind of interesting Greek rivalry at the top of the league, where, of course, Kratzig was the previous all-time most valuable player, and he's replaced by his compatriot. First of all, hello, great to have you back on the show, Bart.
Thank you.
But I guess I have to get started with this. So this is 10 million euro upgrade. What was behind such a drastic increase in market value for the winger?
Yeah, to start first, let's say the Belgian competition is divided in two pieces. We have a regular season of 30 games, and then we have the playoffs of 10 games. We have three kinds of playoffs. The first one is the Champions playoffs, where the 6 top teams of the regular competition play against each other, home and away, so 10 games. So, and then that's the heavy point in the Belgian competition. You also have to know, back then, points are halved. So to make it more interesting, to make it more exciting, to get the teams closer to each other, Club Brugge started that competition second. Ultimately became champion on the 9 game day, and Solis was just imperative in that. In just those 10 games, he had 8 goals, 10 assists, nobody near him, and it were not lucky goals, it were not penalties, it were really beautiful goals, really also for, he set up a few goals for Tresoldi, who became top goal scorer in the Belgian competition. So he was just the man of that competition, and you saw also at the end of the season, every award of player of the season, he got it. Even the one of Transfermarkt, he was voted player of the season. So that's why it's now its second season in Belgium. Normally, that's the point that the top talent is already 24, so maybe not the youngest talent anymore. But that's after 2 seasons. If you show your mark in those 2 seasons, you leave for a top amount. And we see in Belgium always those top amounts increasing. We have a new record last summer with 36 million euro for Arden Jazari. Club Brugge has a lot of money by always playing also the Champions League. Their focus is really on Europe because they get the most money out of it. So they don't need really to sell him because of the finance. So they're going to ask a top amount, and then that's why we think 40 million is a realistic number for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Obviously, the Jupiler Pro League obviously has a very similar system to the Scottish Premiership, but we have the split. So I understand how it works, but I think maybe some people who obviously follow the normal European leagues may struggle a little bit with the format, but that's okay. We do break it down on Transfermarkt. So when you go into Solis's page and look at his stats for this season, as you said, 8 goals and 10 assists in the playoffs, 9 goals and 13 assists in the regular season, if you want to call it that. But in total, 22 goals and 29 assists in 52 games, which is just insane. Especially, the thing that really stood out to me was his performances in the Champions League qualifying games, where he got 1 goal and 4 assists in 4 qualifying games, which are obviously so important to a club like Club Brugge. It goes without saying when you look at those numbers that he's had a very, very good season, but from a Belgian Jupiler Pro League standard, or from that kind of context, how good has he been this season? And also, for people who haven't had an opportunity to watch him, how would you describe him as a player? Because he obviously plays in that left wing, but is he a left winger like Jeremy Doku, or is he a left winger more like Kevin De Bruyne perhaps was once upon a time? If those are the two scales, if that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. If you have to choose one of the two, you'd rather say Kevin De Bruyne. He's a left winger, but he's right-footed. So he usually 2 or 3 times he's going to go inside and then try to reach the far post. Or he's not a selfish guy. So if he sees somebody is better positioned, he is going to give the ball. But in this season, we saw him also more going outside, um, going around his man and then trying to do a 45 or a long cross, something like that. Um, he is also the guy that who takes the corner kicks. For instance, there were some goals on that. Brandon Mechel, Hans van Aken, decent with their head. Alexander Stankovic also. Uh, so yeah, um, he likes to swerve around also. Actually, if you see that Hans van Aken goes a little bit more to get the ball, you can see him going inside and taking over that number 10 position. So it's not like Jeremy Doku that he really stays on that left side. He also goes inside. He sees where the room is, and then sometimes he goes to the other side to just create there a man more position. So if you talk about football intelligence, he has it. So I think, yeah, what his next club will be, he will also be good, according to me.
That's really interesting. You said that about how he likes to cut inside. I was just looking at his stats over the course of his career, and they are predominantly on that left wing. He's played 186 games on the left wing. He's played 26 games on the right wing, 11 games up front, I'm presuming as some sort of false nine, but
Yeah.
only 3 games in the middle of the pitch. Do you think we're maybe talking about a player here who in Belgium can play it wide, but maybe in a bigger league or a faster league, do you think you maybe be more comfortable inside in a maybe number 10 position?
No, I don't think so. He needs that speed. He needs the technique in his speed, and he needs to. Yeah, he's a runner. Um, he can do a lot of distance, and that you don't have in the middle of the field. And he loves scoring, of course. So, like his stats say, so I think he can reach that better. I don't see him as a playmaker.
That's interesting. The other thing that I find really fascinating about him is that we're not talking about a young player here. And so many times when we have you on the show, Bart, we're talking about young players who've come through youth academy in Belgium or maybe in France or something, and then they played first team football in Belgium. They become a star, and then we all know how the story tends to go. But in the case of Tzolis, we're talking about a player who went from Greece to Norwich in England, loan deal to FC20, loan deal to Fortuna Dusseldorf, who then bought him for 3.5 million euros. And in that same summer, he moves on to Club Brugge for 6.5 million euros. So we're talking about a player who tried to play in England, tried to play in Holland, and then tried to play in Germany, and is now in Belgium. And the last, 18, 24 months, he's been very, very good. Do you think, and also, as you mentioned a moment ago, we're not talking about a young player here. He's still young compared to you and me, obviously, but 24 obviously is not typically considered a youth prospect. But
Yeah.
do you think he needed to come to Belgium to find his feet, so to speak, and find a level where he can prove how good he is at senior level in men's football, where perhaps he didn't have that in England or Holland or maybe Germany?
Well, I think he just made one. Well, it's hard to say wrong decision because you don't know it up front. But that's actually Club Brugge wanted him when he went to Norwich. He chose then Norwich, but at that point, the recruitment coordinator was David Rigaud, who later became sport director of Club Brugge, and since last week is now sport director of Feyenoord. David Rigaud has his mentality of every player I want, I keep in contact with him. Every few weeks, I send him a WhatsApp, even it takes on for years. And Solis really like that they keep interest in him. Um, I think the only choice there, Norwich, he said himself, maybe it was too early to go to such a big league, first time abroad, because at the age of 16, he could already go to Barcelona, but his parents didn't want to. Foreign language for the first time. When I heard FC Twente, I hear people say you saw what you see now with Club Brugge, we saw it at times also at Twente, but it doesn't always came out. And then Fortuna Düsseldorf, there he made a great impact. They bought him already, but it was just because they had an option in his contract that he could leave for 6.5 million. That Club Brugge jumped on it. Uh, that's how he came into Belgium. Doesn't know how to say, of course, how it went when he would choose Club Brugge above Norwich some years ago. But yeah, he really needed that confidence that he felt from the sporting director and from the staff in him. And then, yeah, from the beginning, he immediately had an impact. So he was already loved by his teammates and by the public, and that gave him a really boost of confidence. And that's how it went on.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating insight into how Belgian clubs, and particularly Club Brugge, deal with young players and look after them, which unfortunately I don't think is always the case in other leagues, particularly maybe the Premier League, which may be a little more discarding of young talents if things don't work out for them. But obviously things have gone very well for him in Belgium and he's done very well. Having said that, as always, there's a lot of speculation that he could leave this summer. I have his rumours page in front of me, Bart, and there are literally dozens of clubs linked with him. Since the start of this year alone, we've got Tottenham, we've got Atletico Madrid, we got Roma, Manchester United, Juventus, Aston Villa, and most recently Galatasaray. He gave an interesting interview recently when he was asked about the links to Manchester United. And the quote he gave was, "United could convince me. Such a massive club with so much history, it would be hard to say no to that." And then he also went on to say it would have to be a Champions League team from England, Germany, Spain, or Italy. Only a PSG is a better option than those clubs. So, you know, obviously when players give interviews, they have to put on a certain persona, they have to give a certain impression. But he's more or less saying in that interview that if he was to leave Club Brugge, it would be for a top four side in England, a team who's already playing in the Champions League, where he currently obviously plays for Club Brugge in the Champions League. So do we think that's maybe the bottom line or the level that we're talking about? If a club was to come to try and sign him this summer from Club Brugge, it would have to be a team from those top leagues playing in the Champions League.
Yeah, yeah. I just recently, as last week, he also said he would love to join Arsenal, for instance. So I think we know in which category of clubs he is aiming at. But just this weekend, the CEO of Club Brugge, Bob Madou, said from, look, if we're looking to Tzolis, we have our asking price, and we feel that it's really hard to met for clubs from Germany, Italy, Spain, of course, because of the big money in England. Every Premier League club could buy. And if we look to the most recent ones who went to England, we had Telby who went to Sunderland, we had the Cup who went to Brighton, Igor Thiago to Brentford. Probably for Solis, it would go the same direction, just a club one step higher than those clubs. Uh, because of his age already. He's already shown many things. Talbi didn't had shown really big things before he went. Um, but yeah, who's willing to pay 40 million, of course, for him? And it's not even Premier League clubs, I think, don't pay 40 million just for a player to sit on the bench. So he will need to. They will need to be convinced that he will have an impact in the first team. Um, but yeah, well, he's certain with Club Brugge to play Champions League again in the league phase, because they became champion. Why should you leave such a club if you're not convinced that the club you're going to is also going to play Champions League? It's a showcase for every football player. So yeah, AS Roma, Galatasaray. I think it's just rumors. I don't think they are really in contention. Atletico Madrid is actually a rumor that's already going on for 1.5 years. So that could be a real interesting thing. Borussia Dortmund is also a club that's already been mentioned a few times. But yeah, maybe he's got something from already played in the Premier League. I failed there. Uh, I will convince everybody that I have the talent and the mentality to succeed there.
I mean, and just finally, Bart, before I let you go, like I said, it's one thing for a player to say, I'm good enough to play for a top four team in England. It's another thing entirely for him to be good enough to play for a top four team. And as you said, usually top talents in Belgium do maybe make the step below, with all due respect to, a Brentford or a Brighton, so kind of mid-table clubs in England. So we're talking about Tzolis more or less going out and saying, no, I don't want to, well, I'm not saying he doesn't want to go to Brentford or Brighton, but he's saying, no, it's Manchester United, it's Arsenal, this is the level that I want to play at. Do you think he's ready to play at that level already? Or do you think he should maybe move to a Brighton, Brentford, or, perhaps a Borussia Dortmund, perhaps, as the next step?
Yeah, like I said, I think he can play on a level a bit higher than a team like Brentford. But I don't see him playing at the top level at the Premier League at the moment. So teams like Arsenal, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, I ruled them out. Uh, for me, Manchester United is at the moment a bit lower than those teams. And maybe that would be indeed a perfect team for him. Newcastle, for instance, could also be very interesting for him. And otherwise, it will be, if he goes to the Bundesliga or La Liga, it will certainly be for a team that has the ambition to play for the title. I don't see him going to a team underneath that. Uh, Not only ambition wise, but also money wise, that they just can't afford him.
Absolutely. Well, it'd be absolutely fascinating to see who does eventually make a move for him if he does indeed get tempted away from Club Brugge next season. But if not, we still get to watch him in the Champions League, I'm sure. But either way, Bart, I'm sure we'll have you back on the show next season, if not before then, to discuss all things with Tzolis and the Jupiter Pro Leagues. But for now, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.